Great to be here, lovely to meet you all. My name is Keith Grant and I work for Engaged People Recruitment. Today I'm going to talk to you about employability skills, what they are and how to develop them, which is a fascinating topic. But before I get into that detail, I want you to get to know me a little bit more. So this slide represents my life, I think, quite well. So the first picture is a picture of me with the love of my life, which is Taco Bell. Hopefully they come to Ireland soon. And also my boyfriend of 17 years, Peter, did a photo bomb. We have two beautiful children, that's Derek and Mavis. We got them at the beginning of lockdown and they're the most ill-behaved dogs I've ever seen in my life. So if anyone knows a dog trainer, please let me know afterwards. Third picture, I love to travel. I'm a really big Eurovision fan as well. I try and go every year if I can. That's me in Turin this year. Better luck next time for Ireland. And then the last picture is the one I'm probably most proud about. That's me with Engaged People Recruitment. So this picture is special to me because that was taken earlier this year in the Marion Hotel at the Employment and Recruitment Awards, where Engaged People won Best Boutique Recruitment Agency. So I can officially say I work for the best agency in Ireland, which makes me quite proud. But I'm a newbie to recruitment actually, so I only started at Engaged People last year. I'm doing it about a year. My background is banking. I did about 16 years altogether with Deutsche Bank in a number of different roles, mainly back office and change and transformation, before I decided last year to make the move into the recruitment space. The content I'm going to go through today around employability skills, to be very honest with you, I pulled most of that from my experience at Deutsche Bank as a hiring manager. I interviewed 1 million people there, hired a lot of people for my different teams, and it really got me thinking when they asked me to do this, what are the kind of skills that people need that you don't see on a job spec? So what can people work on that's not necessarily relevant to a job, but that can help you become more employable? So I looked through my time at Deutsche and pulled the content from there. But not only that, so obviously I'm in recruitment, I'm doing it for a year now, as I said. So I have a lot of face-to-face time with clients who would interview my candidates, and I get a lot of feedback from them on the back of the interviews that they've done. So I'm going to put some feedback up on the board. It might be a bit small for you to see, but some of the comments I get quite regularly are, not sure that she's a team player. He got flustered easily. Didn't have any questions for me. This type of feedback, believe it or not, there are underlying skills that you can learn and that you can hone that will negate all of this. So it will make you much more presentable at interview, but also much more employable. So I've used the word skills and I've used the word employable a bit already. Let's look at what we mean by skills. So here it says a skill is the learned ability to perform an action with determined results, with good execution, often within a given amount of time, energy, or both. So we could spend all day debating this definition, whether you like it or you don't like it, or you agree or don't agree. The key piece for me that I want you to take away from this definition is the bold word learned. Nobody is amazing at something, at a skill, unless they practice it, they learn it, they hone it. You don't come out of the womb and you're amazing at time management. You have to learn it. So the key piece I want you to take away as we go through all of these skills is that you can be excellent at every single one of these if you practice them. So let's marry those two together, right? So we talked about skills, let's talk about employability. If I look at the different skills that you need to be more employable as a candidate, I'd categorize them into 3 different buckets. So you need to be able to work well with others. That doesn't sound too groundbreaking, but it's true. You need to be able to evidence through a skill that you can work well with other people. You need to be reliable and dependable. And you also need to want to learn. Now you might think that that last one doesn't really sound like there's a skill involved, but believe me, there's a couple of skills there that if you do quite well, it will absolutely be evident to a future employer that you want to learn and you want to develop. So let's look at the first one in a bit of detail. Working well with others. So there was a lot of skills that fell into this bucket. I was going through the research for this presentation. I decided to put the top 5 up on this, right? So you have effective communication, emotional intelligence, teamwork, conflict resolution, problem solving and decision making. In the interest of time, we're only going to touch on these 3, but if you want to do in your own time, if you feel like you don't work well with others, these are the areas that you should really focus in on. Let's look at effective communication. So what is it? So for me, if I see someone who's effective at communicating or good at communicating, in my eyes, they're good at 3 different things. They're good at the verbal communication, which is the talking. They're good at non-verbal, which is mainly body language, but there's other elements in that as well. And then they're good at listening. So if you're good at those 3 elements, and you know you're good at those 3 elements, then by default, you're an effective communicator. But there are many of us, and myself included, that feel like we're not good at some or could improve in some. So let's go through some hints and tips of how you get good at this skill. So the first piece, and I'm going to bring this to an interview scenario because it might resonate more with you guys, is to prepare. So before you go into any situation where you need to talk to someone or communicate with someone, you should be preparing not only what you want to say, but also how you want to say it, the message that you want to deliver, what you want your body language to look like. Do you want to be open and receptive and warm? Do you want to be cold and closed off? Both of which are appropriate depending on the situation. But as part of the preparation process, you need to be thinking about those things. Manage your emotions. So again, if I think about a professional setting, I've seen so many times people getting really upset in work, or people like burst out laughing at something in work as well. Neither are really appropriate in work. There's always a good time for that, but maybe not in the workplace. So try and manage those pieces. The best communicators are able to rub out the emotion and that noise and deliver and receive messages effectively. Watch your tone. Again, this is more from an interview perspective. I've been in many interviews with candidates who talk like this and they sound really excited to get the job and they're really happy to be here. But it doesn't deliver that. You don't listen to the words, you listen to the tone. And tone is often not intentional as well. So that's something just to be mindful of. And the most important one is, and I'll give the probably most effective communicator known to man the stage here, just listen. Listening is the key component to effective communication, right? If you're an effective listener, you're not sitting in an interview thinking, what's the next thing I want to say? What's the next example I want to give while the interviewer is talking? Because by default, you're going to miss what the interviewer is saying. You might catch half of a question and then you'll half answer the question, which is not a good look. That can also lead to the interviewer noting that down and moving on, or the interviewer might come back and ask you the question again, rephrased, to give you a chance to ask it or answer it correctly. But then that might be to the detriment of a future question that the interviewer wants to ask that they're not going to get to ask. Also, if you're a really good listener, and again I've seen this in the past, you can have people that interview that are rubbish at communicating. They'll ask you 5 questions at the same time in an interview and really catch you off guard. If you're good at listening, you can digest those messages and maybe then feed back to them. So what you're asking me is A, B, C, D, E, and get a really good understanding of what they're asking to allow you to answer the question that they're asking. So teamwork is another key skill that you need to be able to evidence that you work well with others. You think that's quite obvious. The definition here is teamwork happens when people work together towards a common goal, which I think is a lovely and very self-explanatory definition. So how do you get good at teamwork? We all know people who are not good at teamwork, and maybe some of yourselves are not good at teamwork. These are the things you should focus on if you feel that. Anything that I put on the slides that's in red and bold is the absolute key takeaway from the whole slide. So there's nothing worse than sitting in a team with a negative Nelly who's sucking the life out of the team because they're complaining, they're moaning and they're giving out. If you have a positive mindset as part of a team, that's 90% of teamwork, is that can-do, want-to-do attitude. Outside of that though, sharing ideas and embracing ideas, they're both sides of the same coin. So sharing ideas, don't be afraid to speak up if you're part of a team, give your thoughts, give your ideas. Again, nothing worse than sitting in a team meeting and someone just sitting in the corner silent. But on the flip side, be open to listening to ideas. You could have someone in the team who's come up with a completely off-the-wall, weird, mad idea. Entertain it, probe through a little bit to understand where they're coming from, because it could be something that could drive the team forward. So embrace those innovative and unique ideas. Clarifying goals and roles within a team is probably more important when you're starting new in a team or you're creating a team. It's key that you all understand what the core goal is for the team, so where you're all marching towards, but also what's your role in that team and what's not your role in that team. And that can become important, and sometimes this does happen unfortunately in a workplace setting, when things start to go wrong and then fingers start to be pointed. If you're really clear at the outset what your role was, it can negate a lot of that. And then going back to the last slide, another core piece of the teamwork skill is being able to communicate clearly and effectively with your team and with others. Problem solving and decision making. I did not do that to the slide, just so you know. So what is it? This was probably the most difficult definition I had to come up with for any of the skills today. So it's solving problems and it's making decisions, quite simple, so simply like that. So let's look at the problem piece first, right? Again, I seem to start all my questions or all my statements with there's nothing more irritating than, but there is definitely nothing more irritating than when you're in a team meeting or you're talking to someone doing group work in college and someone's in your face going, what's the problem? What's the issue? And you're thinking, you're the problem, you're the issue. So it's so important to be able to understand and identify problems with a view then to potentially coming to a solution. And there's some tips and tricks to do that, right? So define the problem. So put a name on the problem is the first thing you need to do. Define what it is. Then look at the facts. What's causing the problem? Outside of that root cause, are there other things that are contributing to the problem? So get all of that laid down on the table. Once you've done the both of those, that's the problem piece identified. You then flip into problem solving mode then, right? So then you start to analyze the data. So what can we do to circumvent the problem? Who can we involve to really get us around this problem? Is there a workaround to this problem, etc.? That will allow you to come to a conclusion. So I specifically didn't say here, solve the problem, because there's going to be some problems that you can't solve and you need to go for help. But people get bogged down in steps 1, 2, and 3, and they continually talk and churn about problems, but never come to a conclusion to either escalate it to someone who can fix it or solve it yourself. So that last step is key. So how do you get good at making decisions? So don't stress and forget about emotions are probably the key pieces for me. So I'll give you a personal example here of someone who's not good at making decisions, which is my partner, Peter. So he would, and it could be something as trivial as where we go for dinner on Friday, straight away he starts to get stressed and he's like, well, where do you want to go? Do you want pizza or do you want chips? And he tries to make he deflects the decision making to me. And then if I really push him to make the decision, that's when the emotions come in, starts to get a bit annoyed, a bit angry. The fact is, right, that's in a personal setting, but in life, you're going to be paid a salary to make decisions. That will be part of your job. So there is no point in getting stressed over a decision-making process or getting emotional about it. You just have to do it. The main reason why people get stressed, though, is that they don't have the facts. They don't understand the context, they don't understand the background to be able to make an informed decision. So my advice there would be ask an expert. So speak to someone else who's had to make that decision in the past or who's been in that team in the past. But the key piece with asking an expert is you still need to own that decision-making process. You can't say, John told me to say this, so therefore John made the decision. You need to own the decision-making process, whether the outcome is positive or negative. And particularly if it's negative, you can learn from that and move forward, and that will actually make you become more resilient. And we'll speak about resilience later. And again, with making decisions, you can get caught up in a churn of deciding how to decide to make a decision. Set a timeline, and then once you make the decision, commit to that outcome. So the second bucket of skills outside of working well with others is being reliable and dependent. And there are 3 skills here that I want to talk to you about, right? There's time management, self-motivation, and being open-minded. Now you might think the bottom 2 are not really related to skills, but they definitely are. Let's go through time management first, which is probably the easiest one. So time management is the process of organising and planning how you divide your time between different activities, as simple as that. The easiest way to become good at time management is to make a list, prioritize the list, and then the key piece that people forget is block your diary or block your calendar or make time to do the priorities on the list. If you do the 3 of those, I promise you, you'll be really good at managing your time. Reprioritization, I call out here where you need to. Don't reprioritize because you decide you want to have a coffee at 11 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock, so you're going to juggle your work. Reprioritize if there's an external factor which means that you have to reprioritize. As an example, if your boss says, Keith, I need you to go and visit a client this morning, you rejuggle your work. Try and make it the exception rather than the rule. So self-motivation is the force that keeps us pushing us to go on. Again, I love that definition. But that's exactly what it is. And actually it is a skill that you need to learn and develop to keep yourself motivated. And there's ways that we can do that. So focus on the positives. It's so easy to focus on the negative things that are happening in the world or in life. And really, the more you focus on the negative, and I'm sure you've all experienced this before, the less desire or want you have to do something with work or do a task or do a job. So try and focus on the positives where you can. Break down tasks. This comes back to the time management piece. A lot of people, myself included, if I have a mountain of work in front of me and I can't see the wood from the trees in terms of what I need to do, I tend to say, I'll just go have a coffee and I'll do it later. I don't have the motivation to get the work done. So my advice here is break it down into smaller chunks, then you do your prioritization piece, block time to do them, and then you can deliver on those tasks. Never doubt your abilities, put that in red. That's probably key from a self-motivation perspective. You have people who, and I've seen this again in interview in particular, people come into the interview and they're absolutely shaken and terrified. And I see it actually more, to be honest, in my recruitment career with candidates when I'm briefing them for an interview. So before they go for interview, and they're like, I'm not able to do this job. Oh my God, there's like 15 things on the job spec I know I'm not able to do. You're going to be called for interview only if the hiring manager thinks you can do the job. It's simple as that. A hiring manager who's busy doing other stuff, doesn't want to interview people or take time away from their job to interview, is not going to call you for an interview for the crack. They want to get this job filled so they can fill the position in their team and move on. So from an interview perspective in particular, if you get called for interview, everybody believes that you can do that job, so you just need to believe that too. And the last piece, just add in my little Nike logo, just do it. The key for self-motivation for me is not sitting and waiting for something to happen, just get it done. And the more you do that, the more you'll find it easier to build that self-motivation skill. So being open-minded, so I'll give you a laugh. So before I did this presentation, I would have said that I was the most open-minded man in Dublin, 100%. And then as I was looking through definitions of what open-minded means, I came across this. So open-mindedness is the willingness to search actively for evidence against one's preferred beliefs, plans or goals, and to weigh such evidence fairly when it is available. So if you ask me if I'm going out of my way to speak to people that don't have the same belief system as me, to understand where they're coming from and then weigh that evidence fairly, I don't. I absolutely don't. I definitely would need to learn from this myself. And there are things that we can do to be more open-minded. So be curious. So in events like this, when you're sitting beside strangers that you don't know, ask them questions, try and understand their background, where they come from. That will help you not necessarily agree with what they're saying, but it make you more exposed to different ideas and different ways of thinking. Don't feel angry when you're wrong. Another key for being more open-minded, because people by their nature, if they feel angry when they're wrong, the inference is they feel that they're always right. And people who think that they're always right are definitely more closed-minded than open-minded. Have empathy, so being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes to understand their journey, why are they saying things the way they say it, will also help you be a little bit more open-minded. And then consider what others are saying, and I use the word consider specifically here. And I'll give you an example. If you're a fan of a certain politician, or not a fan of a certain politician, and before they open their mouth, you already know, I'm going to love what this person's going to say, or you already know, I'm going to hate what this person's going to say, I'm not going to agree with it. But you're not necessarily listening to what they're saying, you're not considering the words and the content or at face value, you have that preconceived notion. So in a professional setting, you might have someone in work that you don't particularly agree with all the time. To be more open-minded, definitely consider the context of what they're saying at face value. You don't have to agree with it, but that skill set is what makes you more open-minded, and you're really considering what they're saying before you make a judgment. So the last bucket of skills is around learning, and at the beginning I said this is not necessarily, or you might think this is not necessarily a skill. The number one piece of feedback I get from clients when they interview people is that person just wants a job. They don't want to develop, they don't want to learn something new, they want to progress, they just want a job. This is so important to kind of negate that for you as a candidate for interview, and there are two skills that I want to talk through here that will really help you with that. So one is embracing change and the other is on resilience. So let's talk about embracing change. So embracing change is accepting that you can't keep everything under your control, and that is the key takeaway for this entire slide. You're not going to be able to control most of the time change that's happening at work, change that's happening in your personal life, change that's happening at university. But if you accept it and understand that change is normal, change, what's the phrase? Nothing is constant but change. It will really go a long way to help you embrace change, which is the skill that we're talking about here. Acknowledging fear and take action is also an important part of embracing change, because you could have a genuine, deep-seated fear that you're losing your job or your dog is going to die or something, right, in regards to change. So take action on that. If you feel like there's a danger you might be losing your job, speak to a manager, speak to someone at work. Same with the dog scenario, speak to your vet. It might not necessarily alleviate your fears, it might actually confirm your fears, but it will help you acknowledge that you're embracing change or you're trying to embrace change that little bit more. The no venting piece is important, and I'll give you that more from my perspective. I've been in at Deutsche Bank in a number of situations where there's been some change that have negatively impacted the team, as an example. And there's been situations where people have been proper venting in front of a lot of people about how angry they are and how upset they are. And whilst, again, we talked about emotion earlier, but whilst everyone understood the emotion, really that venting didn't benefit anyone. It didn't benefit the person, it didn't benefit the people around them. It just really put them in a negative light. So just be mindful of that going forward in terms of venting and work. And then ask for help. Change can be super difficult for people to manage, and the more experienced you are with embracing change, the easier it gets. But if you're starting out on your journey about embracing change and you find it difficult, ask colleagues for help, close friends for help, maybe even professional help if it's something happening in your personal life. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because that ultimately will help you be able to embrace change and nurture that skill set a bit more. I've saved the best skill to last, so psychological resilience. It's the ability to cope mentally or emotionally with a crisis or return to a pre-crisis state quickly. So unfortunately, and I did say at the beginning that all skills are learned, and that's true, they are, resilience is more learned from experience. So as you go through a really difficult period in work or in college or at home, once you get through the other side, you can look back and do a post-mortem and see, okay, how could I have done that better, or what could have happened better there? And you take those learnings and you move on. And the more you do that, the more resilient you become. So definitely learning from experience will be key here with resilience. But there are ways to speed that up a bit. So one of the things is definitely facing your fears. So me today, I was saying earlier, my biggest fear is public speaking. I'm really, really bad at it, and I feel like I need to practice a lot to kind of get in some way comfortable with it. So when I was asked to do today, it's probably the second time I've spoken in front of people in a long, long time, I said, you know what, to practice what I preach, I need to put my hand and say, yeah, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to try it, and then the more I do it, the more resilient I will become about public speaking. So build positive relationships is more in context with when you're going through that very difficult phase or a very challenging period. If you have your rocks in your personal life or your professional life that you can lean on, that will help you become more resilient to get through. And then the last point is just looking after yourself. You should be putting yourself in the center of all of the decisions that you make, be it personal or professional. The more you do that, the more resilient you become, and the more easy you will find it to be more resilient going forward. So look, that's really it. I'll do a quick recap. I'm not going to read through all of this, but essentially there are 3 different buckets of skills that you should be looking at if you want to be more employable. And I promise you, if you start to work on some of them, while other people in the process that you're in from a work perspective are not, you will definitely be more employable than them if you get good at these. So I will leave it there. I have some I've been Keith from Engage People, thank you so much. My LinkedIn and Twitter are there. I love speaking to new people, particularly anyone who wants to get into a career in financial services. That's my background. So Recruiting Keith, LinkedIn, Recruiting Keith, Twitter. I have an Instagram, but I'm not going to share it with you. But Derek and Mavis also have an Instagram, and they'd love to share it with you. They give great career advice, so feel free to give them a follow. Done. Brilliant.
So I suppose I'll go in chronological order. In terms of, I suppose, the most undervalued skill and I suppose learning that students and people looking for jobs today and in the next few weeks, what would you say that is?
That's a good question. So I think from my perspective, the essential or effective communication at the beginning is core. And a lot underneath that, the preparation piece is probably most valuable, particularly for people who are looking for jobs. The amount of times I've interviewed someone or done prep with a candidate who's applied for, honestly, 20 jobs. We all do it at the beginning when we're trying to get a job and trying to start our career. From a preparation perspective, what the employer wants to hear is, you only want to work for my company. So you need to do a lot of preparation, understand not only the job spec that you've applied for, but also what businesses is the company in, how could you add value to those businesses, and that would start from preparation, then communicating that in the interview process.
And I suppose, what are the key things, I suppose, everyone here today should be portrayed when speaking to the employer, speaking to people at stands?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I think everything in this presentation is probably of equal importance outside of effective communication, which is number 1. But I think what you should be taking away is, how do you work that into an interview style answer? So you're able to portray that you're good at teamwork without saying I'm good at teamwork. So be thinking about concrete examples from your previous experience, even in college, where you've been resilient or you've dealt with a difficult situation, because how you bring those into interview style questions will be able to evidence to the interviewer that you have these skills without you saying I have these skills.
Fantastic. I have 2 more questions.
Great.
I suppose, what is the importance of networking post getting the job to kind of future employability or promotion?
That's a really good question, actually. So the more senior you get, the more it's about who you know, not what you know. And I promise you that's true. So the first thing I would recommend, as soon as you start in an organisation, particularly large corporate organisations, they have a large amount of employee networks you can join, like sports and social, CSR, that kind of thing. Definitely they should be your first port of call for networking. But as you get more experience, then force yourself to go to networking events, like the Grad Ireland things that happen. Dublin Chamber of Commerce do some great stuff as well. They're a great way to get to know people in your industry and to build your brand outside of the small team that you work with. And then as roles come up or opportunities come up, you're front of mind then, or you could be front of mind, which is a positive.
Final question, I suppose, is there any trends you're seeing post-COVID in terms of interviews, in terms of recruitment that everyone should be aware of, aside from what you might have mentioned today?
Yeah, I mean the big change with COVID is obviously remote working. There's a demand. So initially, I would have seen when I started in recruitment, everybody wanted remote or hybrid. But as we've gone through the past year, actually I'm finding grads and younger people, I say younger people in quotation marks, they want to be in the office. They want to kind of get to know people and see face to face with people. So it's more people in their kind of 30s, 40s that are looking for hybrid remote, and younger people are really looking to get back into the office. And I think that's a challenge for employers because they have a diverse workforce, right? So trying to have a policy that kind of fits everyone can be challenging. And I've definitely had jobs turned down. I've had candidates rejected purely because of their stance on remote working.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all right. Hi, how are you?
I just arrived a little bit late, so I couldn't see the CV checks.
Yes, so everything's being recorded. For everything that's being recorded.
So you can watch it afterwards.
We're going right out in 2 hours.
Oh, so it will be on the site?
Yes.
Okay.
Fantastic. Perfect, no worries. Guys, we'll finish up there. Relevant to all, please.
Thank you.